am I, oh, we're being recorded. Okay.
Yeah, I just started the recording because
You can introduce me.
okay.
I'm not prepared for that.
Well, I was going to say, I thought about that and I thought, oh, this is Kim Olver, and there's so much to say about you because I think about the history of you, and you've been the executive director for WGI, the executive director for well, in the U.S. and WGI worldwide, which is a big deal because Glasser wanted you to do that, and they wanted you to do that position, which is, I think, saying something about you. And you've had your own business for quite some time, that I've known you probably all the time that I've known you, since the 90s, maybe late
I think it
90s.
was the 90s.
Uh-huh.
In
And
Kentucky, we met, I
yep,
think.
yep. And I know how you got into WGI, but I would love to hear how you really what brought you into the fold, so to speak, into WGI. What did
Well,
bring you?
I started my choice theory training because I was working this, people who know me will understand this. I have a high freedom need, and I was working for a company that did community residential program for people who were being discharged from lifelong mental health hospitalization. Back when we had people with schizophrenia and we locked them away in the back ward of psych hospitals. And I came out of college when we were getting people out of the hospital and putting them in community programs. And I did that for 5 years. And I would probably still be doing it, but I didn't really respect my boss. He was asking me to do things that I didn't think were right. So I looked for another job. And I found a job at a foster care agency called Family Care for Children and Youth. It was called Counseling and Care when I first started there. They went through a couple name changes and, executive director changes. And I had three offers for jobs. One was at Job Corps, one was at a drug and alcohol place, and one was this foster care agency. And they were going to train me in reality therapy. I didn't know what reality therapy was, but I thought, I wanted to go back to school, but I had little kids, and I thought, well, let me do this certification program and I'll at least be learning something. And that was all it took because Nancy Buck was my basic trainer. And anybody who's had Nancy for training knows how fabulous she is. And so I remember after my basic training, I learned a lot, but the biggest thing was I looked at Nancy Buck and I said, I want to be her when I grow up. And I never dreamed in a million years that I would be teaching choice theory too and traveling the world like she was, because she had two boys and I had two boys. Hers were twins,
Mhm.
but they were a little older than mine. And it just, that's how it started. And then I got certified, and then my company made me the director of training, and I did a lot of training there. And I found out that training and teaching really was what I loved. And that's when I left the job there in 2004 to start my own business. And I wanted to do a business because I knew Glasser's vision was to teach the world choice theory, but I felt like we really weren't doing that because we were only teaching educators and counselors pretty much. And while they use these ideas with their clients and their students, we weren't always teaching it to them. Maybe educators were, I think. But it felt like there were so many everyday people who could learn about choice theory if we made it more, uh, friendly for the average person. So that's what I tried to do in my business. And I think it was mainly because of that, Glasser noticed and wanted me to do the executive director job. And how could I say no? I mean, without William
Mhm.
Glasser and choice theory, I always say I'd have no friends because all my friends are choice theory people. And I
Mhm.
also can say I would have no job, no meaningful work, because everything that I do is built on the foundation of choice theory and the things that Glasser taught. So I have a forever debt to pay to that man and these ideas, and I
Mhm,
plan to continue doing that till I can't do it anymore.
mhm, mhm.
So
How interesting. I knew some of the background, but I wasn't aware of some of it as well. And you've been then through some changes with Glasser and his thinking. And so how did that like propel you forward too? Because I know he did some transitional thinking and changes in the organization with from control theory to choice theory, that kind of thing. And how did that, yeah, because that resonates in your book too, I think.
yeah, well, one of the things I say about studying a theorist who's still living,
Yeah,
it is the most exciting and frustrating thing at the same time, because every year you would go to the conference that he would put on and you'd hear him speak, and he was all excited about new things that he was developing. And so you got excited too. It's like, oh, this is amazing. So it was never really finished because there was always the next thing. But also, as a person who's trying to keep up with that kind of whirlwind of brilliance, it's like I go to the next conference and I'm like, whoa, whoa, slow down. I'm still trying to catch up from last year. And now there's new stuff. And while it was exciting, it was also frustrating because I always felt a little behind in playing catch up. So that's kind of how I felt about all the transition. And I feel like if Glasser were alive today, we would be on to choice theory 5.0 or
yep,
something. He would have innovated millions of times by now because, well, maybe not millions. It's 11 years since his death, so
yep,
probably at least 20 times by now.
yeah,
So I miss that. And I think other
yeah.
people miss that too. It was just so exciting and so wonderful to be a part of that.
Yeah, he was innovative. Absolutely.
A man before his time.
Yeah, he really
And he
was.
took a lot of grief for that. Um,
Hmm.
I just know it couldn't have been easy standing for what he believed was right because other people were not necessarily buying into what he was saying
No,
in his field, but counselors did and educators did, but not psychiatrists.
no. And
He
it's
was a
funny because
stranger in his own land, really, I
yeah,
think.
and now when you look at research, his ideas are now they're going, oh, look at this.
Like
The
it's new
things that he
stuff.
like it's new, like it's a new idea. And it's like we've been saying this the whole time. If you would have
Yeah,
listened to
yeah,
Glasser
it's
back in the day, he's been saying relationships, are very, very important and it's interesting to watch
yeah, I
the
agree.
transition.
It's
And
very
know that
validating,
it
but
is
also frustrating because a lot of people aren't connected and recognize the work of Glasser to say
right.
his work was foundational. It's like they just discovered these ideas.
I know it's crazy. And so this interview is going focusing on your book and the research in your book because we're doing a research symposium. So I wondered when you were thinking about writing the first book, the relationship book, you created had a relationship I guess a research database to develop just to research about relationships. Do you want to tell us how that
Yeah.
came about? Yeah.
Well, let me first say, I am not a researcher. Okay. I don't like research. I don't really, it's not exciting to me. I understand the importance of it though. As a counselor, one of the things I can tell you is I've never taken insurance. So that means I have not been, subject to the rules that insurance companies impose. But you would be well aware of this, that many managed care companies will not fund you as a counselor if you're not using evidence-based practice. So that means that research is like our bread and butter. If we don't have the research, then insurance companies aren't going to pay for what we do, which is really problematic. So when I wanted to write this book about secrets of happy couples, I knew what made couples happy in my mind. My theory was couples are happy when they stop trying to change one another. That was my theory. And so I was just going to write a book about what I thought. I thought, who's going to care what Kim Olver thinks about relationships? So I thought maybe I should do some research. So I set a goal to interview 1,000 happy couples about what made their relationship happy. And then I took this program online that taught me how to self-publish because I didn't know about writing books either. So the person on that was teaching us said, you don't have to do 1,000. If you do 100, that's valid research. And I went, whoo, because I was having trouble
Yeah.
finding happy couples. And it was scary to me because I realized that there's so many people in the world who are in relationships that are okay, mediocre, but they're not the kind of relationship that people are feeling excited or good about. And that made me sad. And I thought choice theory had the answer for them. So I kept feeling like, gosh, this book has to get written, but I didn't want to write the book until I had the 100 happy couples. And what would happen is I spoke a lot. I was speaking a lot of places, and every time I had an audience, I would say, is there anybody in the audience that qualifies as a happy couple? And I'll tell you what that was for me. Or do you know any happy couples you can refer me to? So my criteria were you had to be together at least 10 years because everybody looks good in the beginning of a relationship. So it had to be at least 10 years. And if you were apart from each other, you would both tell me that you're happy. You couldn't be together because people would say they're happy anyway. So those were the only two requirements. You didn't have to be married, but you had to be together for 10 years and individually tell me that you were happy. So what would happen is these couples would come forward and say, "Oh yeah, we're happy." And I would talk to them and one would say, "Yes, we're so happy." And the other one would say, "You better not use us." So of course I didn't tell the other person I'm not using them. So I had people filling out my surveys and a lot of them I had to discard because they weren't happy couples. The other thing that happened that was interesting is I had a lot of young adults in their 20s or 30s say, "Oh, my parents are really happy." And I talked to the parents and they'd say, "Oh, no, we we're not authentic around our children. We don't want them to know about the struggles that we're going through." So I thought with all the people I spoke to that it would be easy. I thought 6 months to find 100 happy couples. That's what I planned for. It took me 2 years to find 100 happy couples. And I was very careful. I didn't want to bias the research by looking in churches or synagogues or mosques. I tried to keep, if people were religious, that's fine, but that's not where I wanted to look for them. So I wasn't going to places like that. I put an advertisement in Psychology Today. I got some people that way, and a lot of other people came through referrals. And so it was a long time. In fact, I started to write the book before the research was done because I felt this push that people needed the book. And then when the research was done, I went back to the book and I filled in what I found. So I had those two criteria. That was the thing. I did this anonymous survey, and then I used qualitative data. So I just, took their answers and I don't even know the proper word for it, but I kind of coded it under different categories and I was able to come up with the things that I found in the book that made happy couples. And I was pleased in the book. There's an appendix that goes through the top 20 things.
Mhm.
And the only reason I didn't do top 10 was because I was hoping to hear the 7 caring relationship habits that Glasser had. And I found them. all, but I had to go through 20. So I think 5 of them were in the top 10, or maybe 4 of them were in the top 10, and then the other 3 or the other 2 were in 10 to 20. And that was exciting. And then the 4 big things that they said were important for a successful marriage, they talked about effective communication. That was one. They said monogamy was another.
Hmm.
And the other, well, one of them was the big one that I was looking for, which was, of course, they weren't trying to change one another. And the last one went along with Glasser's solving circle ideas. And the last one was that you had to be willing to have something bigger than yourself to be accountable to. So for some people, that was God. And for other people, it was their relationship. But it was, being able to subjugate their own individual needs to something more important to them. And again, that was important. That was an important finding for me because I wasn't looking for religious people necessarily, but that's what happened with the people who said they were happy. So it wasn't a real scientific, evidence-based kind of research. Like, I don't think that that would hold up under the evidence-based standards, but it was a start, and it was good for what I wanted to do with the book. And I could write in the book about the research. So that's why I did that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested, the flip side. So you found a lot of people who weren't happy. Did you find out why they weren't happy too?
No, I didn't, because I didn't I didn't want them to know that they were in the group that was unhappy, because one
Okay.
of them was happy. So I didn't want to create a lot of marital discord. So no, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask those things. But Janet, that could be your book.
No, I don't want to know what made him not happy. No, no, no. Oh, that's funny. But I just wondered, because when you ask someone, what those questions, you're going to find out, underlying things. Did you find that there was a connection with any of that with the basic needs? Just curious. I'm just curious. I'm
I
wondering about that.
didn't, because I wasn't connecting it to basic
Okay.
needs. I didn't. I wrote a chapter about basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly important to marital satisfaction, but that wasn't part of the survey,
Mm-hmm.
because I
So
felt
none
like
of
I would
that.
have to teach them about basic needs in order to survey. And I didn't want to take the time to do that.
Okay.
100, that was a lot for me.
That was that's a lot, but it gave you 100 people to find is a significant research, really.
Well, it was
100, yeah,
200 people because it was
yeah,
100 couples, right? So it was tedious for me, because I am not a researcher, and to have to go through them and read what they say and decide, okay, what does that stand for? What does
yeah,
that
yeah,
mean? It was a lot for
yeah.
me.
One
Um,
question I would have of you
okay,
is
Tom.
just numbers question. You found 100 people who were happy. How many people that you interviewed were not happy?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know, but there were certainly more unhappy than there were happy.
Well,
Because
I'm sure of that it took you 2 years to get that, but it would be interesting to see what percentage of people were happy people, happy couples.
Well, I can go back through the research because I still have it. I can figure that out, but I don't know that off the top of my head, Tom. That's a
Like
good
if you
question.
interviewed 1,000 altogether and you found 100 that were happy, you got 900 that were not. So 90% of the people are not happy.
I don't think it was that much. I don't think I did 1,000 people. I might have done 800 people. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot, and there were a lot of them that just
Yeah,
weren't happy. And it just broke my heart, because I knew
yeah.
they could be if they just understood choice theory and practiced the caring habits with each other. I knew that they could have better relationships. So I just felt really compelled to get the book finished. And I'm glad I
And
did.
I'm wondering if, that just brings up a research point. So I wonder if researchers get caught in that. It's a moral, that's a moral thing, how you feel about that. Like you said, it's really, I wonder if researchers get caught in that too. Here is,
I don't know.
that's a significant saying. I interviewed 800 people to get 100 happy couples. Wow. That's
Yeah.
significant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also, and I wonder, well, I guess you'd have,
Don't
the way,
quote that because I'm not sure
no,
that's
no,
the right
no,
number. This was
I'm
back
just thinking, but that's a lot
15
of
years
people.
ago I did
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah. I know, I remember, but I find it, like you, I find it kind of shocking that if you're unhappy, what are you doing to be happy? Are you
Well,
are you
and
working at it?
it also begged the question for me, how many people are out there in marriages and are unhappy because all the people around them seem so happy and
Yeah,
they don't know that they're really not. So they
right.
have this unrealistic idea about what marriage or relationships are supposed to be, and they have this standard of what they think. And now I think it would be even worse because of social media. Everybody posts their best selves on social media, and people think, oh, that's their true life. But it's not. And I think a lot of children, the ones that told me, oh, my parents are happy, I'm wondering how happy they are in their relationships because they're trying to attain this unrealistic level of happiness that their parents projected that wasn't actually true. So there's a lot of questions there, but
Mhm.
those weren't the things that I was most interested in. I was
Yeah,
interested in trying to help people take their not horrible relationships. I mean, sometimes I think people who have horrible relationships, the best thing they can do is separate. But I'm talking about people who were just in ho hum, yeah, I think this is as good as it's going to get kind of
mhm.
relationships. Those people have good chance to become happier if they start to learn some of the ideas that Glasser taught us.
Or if they're saying it's more difficult to get out of the relationship than it is to stay in the relationship.
Say that again, Tom.
More difficult or worse to get out, to try and get out of the relationship than it is to stay in the relationship.
Yeah,
I find that
sometimes that's true.
the apathy, because it's so hard to get out there on your own.
Well, to
Even,
go
Well,
through a
sometimes it's
divorce,
financial.
yeah, yes, and it could be a million things, yes. And so
Children.
it's so hard.
to go
Um,
through a divorce, especially when you have children,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just put up
yeah,
with it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, better to stay with the devil you know.
that's
Sometimes
right. Yeah,
people
yeah,
think
yeah,
that.
yeah. Hmm. Hmm. So let's fast forward. New book. What what
Oh,
what inspired the new book? Because
COVID, actually.
you've been on a whole new
I
trajectory,
have. It's one
yes,
of the
tell me.
reasons that I stopped being the executive director was because I wanted more time to really devote to this new project of mine. So I call it mental freedom.
Mhm.
And I wanted a good name because I think one of the things that is challenging is the words choice theory. I don't think there's anybody sitting around their kitchen table or their living room or work saying, I need some more choice theory in my life. But I think there's a lot of people saying they need more mental freedom. So I picked a name that I thought would resonate with people. And I started this during COVID. And what had happened was, it's so funny because it was exactly 3 years ago. And I just finished my book um, last week. I finished the last word last week on the beach, Barbara. And
Yay.
Yay.
yeah. And so during COVID, I had planned before COVID ever happened, I was going to Florida, where I am right now, to visit my mother for a month in March. Well, we all know what happened in March in 2020. And so I live alone in Chicago, and my mother lives alone in Florida. And all of my work outside of the home was canceled, like nobody was doing training. or speaking engagements. So I thought I'll just stay in Florida with my mother so that we both have some company. And the first 2 weeks of COVID were frightening and chaotic for me. I was watching with my mother. She watches Morning Joe every morning, and you hear the death toll, and they're talking about all of the precautions and everything you have to do. And I don't know if you guys remember, but oh my gosh, it was terrifying. At first, I thought, oh, no problem. They'll just keep us at home for 2 weeks and everything will be fine. Who knew? I surely didn't know, but I was scared, and it kept getting more scary. And after about 2 weeks of being off balance, I said to myself, Kim, what is wrong with you? You know, choice theory. You don't have to feel like this. You know how to focus on the things you have control over. So, one of the things I already knew about Zoom, I've been using Zoom for a long time for my business. So, two things I did right then was I started to have Friday afternoon happy hours on Zoom. I would advertise them on Facebook, and friends would come on and we'd talk and we'd play music. Sometimes we danced. We just kept connected. And then I would also offer sessions for emergency people who were just, fried by what was going on with them. And so I took control and I helped myself be busy, and I made meeting because I didn't feel like I had any power over what was happening, and I certainly wasn't getting power from my work. So I did these things. And then I started to think about what is it that makes my how was it that I was able to write myself in relative short time, because I've been in touch with other choice theory people and they weren't faring as well as I had. So I started to think about choice theory, and I started to think about how my life had literally been changed by it. And Janet, you know most of these things, but I talk about all of these stress points in my life where I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I chose to lean into choice theory. So when I first learned it in 1987, it was something that I learned that I used at work. So it was just, a counseling technique. That's what it was for me. What do you want? What are you doing? Is it working? Okay, let's make a plan. But I certainly wasn't talking to my kids like that, or my husband like that, or my friends like that. This was a work thing. But then it was 1994, and my husband was diagnosed with leukemia. So this was a long time. We had 4.5 years of him being sick, and then he had a bone marrow transplant. Our kids were young. And, I needed something to help me through that time, and choice theory was the thing. And then he eventually passed away, and I had to manage that. And so I applied choice theory to grief. And then I was a single mom raising two teenage boys virtually by myself. And again, I needed choice theory. I leaned on Nancy Buck a lot with peaceful parenting. I call her sometimes. I don't know what to do. Everybody in my family thinks I need to spank them, but I just can't do it. And we would have conversations like that. And then my youngest son, he lived, this was the miracle, because Kyle was a daredevil his whole life, and he lived to be 18. I was like, yay. But then he told me he wanted to join the army and go fight in Iraq. And so he did that twice. He was gone for 2 years at different periods of time in Iraq, and I was terrified for him. That was even harder for me than going through the death of my husband, was sending my baby boy into harm's way. Janet, I know you know what I'm talking about, because
Yeah.
your son is also military. So I know you know what I'm talking about, but you are in the military. Your husband was. I don't know anybody in the military. I'm like pacifist civilian all day long, and here I have this child. So there was that. And then after that, I'm in a hot air balloon in Arizona when I break both my legs. And I was in a wheelchair for months, and it was just all of these things. And I found ways to use choice theory to help me get through all of these difficult times in my life. So because of COVID, I had the time to just sit and really reflect and think about, what did I learn through all of that that would be relevant to other people? So from all of that, I pulled out 6 principles. Now, they're all based on choice theory, and you'll hear the choice theory in them, but they're different from what Glasser has said. It's like people who have been through my program have said, choice theory is the theory, but mental freedom is the how to actually live it, right? I teach mental freedom without teaching the chart. I don't pull out that chart, but I do talk about basic needs. I talk about perception. There's a lot of, I talk about people are doing the best they can to get what they want at any point in time. So you'll hear some of Glasser's choice theory. I'm very clear that this is something that came from a foundation of choice theory, but it's different. And in 6 sessions, people learn these 6 principles. And in the sessions, we do a personalization. So I'll ask them, where in your life do you need to apply this principle? And there's always something. There's always something. And so it's exciting. And today I had a meeting with 2 people who've been through the program and are becoming certified in mental freedom. So they're doing their own mental freedom sessions with their clients, and they're telling me about it, and they're having really exciting things happen. And I did some research with mental freedom in 2023. And that was amazing. So this was more quantitative. So this is more the evidence-based practice stuff. And how did I know to do this? I didn't. But I had a friend who's a researcher at Penn State, and I met him through the Yellow Ribbon program that I used to speak at. So I reached out to him. His name is Cam Richardson. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, here's what you need to do. He said, you need to train people in mental freedom and provide a curriculum. Because when you're doing research, there needs to be a curriculum, as I know you know, Janet. So I wrote out this 63-page curriculum for these 6 sessions. And it's basically scripted, like, this is what you need to teach in this session. This is what you teach in this session. And I taught them that. I gave them the curriculum, and then they started to use mental freedom with their clients. Only they had, we did a random assignment. So some of their clients went to the mental freedom group, and some of them went to a control group. And if they were in the control group, they got treatment, but they got the treatment that normally was the person administered. It wasn't mental freedom. So, and there was another 2 people from Iran who did the same thing, but they added a control group that had no counseling at all. So that was one group, that was like a separate research project. So pre and post, we had them do 2 scales. One was ways of coping scale, and the other was Riff's psychological well-being scales, or ways of coping questionnaire. It was, not scales. And then I had an exit survey for them to fill out, things like which principle was most important to you, which had the most effect, those kind of things. And I have a person at Governor State University in Chicago who is crunching the numbers for me right now. And I don't know what it's going to come out to be, but she says it looks good. And Kim Richardson said to me, Kim, you don't have to prove that mental freedom is better than the other group. You just have to prove that it's not worse. So all I have to do is show mental freedom is as good as the other treatments that people are using. And I'm pretty sure that it's better. But I am biased about that. So I have to see what the research numbers show, but the researcher says it looks good. So that's going to go in the book. So I said the book is finished, but there's a space waiting for me to write the preliminary research data anyway, because I want to have that in there.
Opposite from what you did with the first book, where you had
well, quantitative and qualitative. It's just Yeah, and the
Hmm.
difference for me this time was I actually had a researcher to tell me what to do because I wouldn't have known to do that. It's
Mhm.
easy, it's simple. I, I maybe learned about that in college, but I went to college a long time ago. So I don't remember. But it was very helpful. His help was truly invaluable to get that research design figured out.
Yeah.
And then the people who became trained, the first people, they are people, some of them answered a random ad, and some of them are people that I know. Some of them are choice theory people, some of them are not. So we have all of these factors. Some of them are counselors, some of them are coaches. So we'll tease out all those little different factors that are in there. But what I found was um, I think that the people who didn't know choice theory were more impacted by mental freedom than the ones who knew choice theory because they were already on a path of mental freedom, but they also knew what I was trying to get at better. So it was easier to apply, I think. But yeah, that was the research for mental freedom. So I'm excited. And it feels meaningful to me. And I I I think it's probably the most important work that I've done. And I remembered, I put this in the book, that when Glasser went from control theory to choice theory, it's like he learned powers work. And then he had added enough to it, the basic needs and the total behavior part that he felt like he could call it something else. And I also remember Glasser telling us, sure, you can change the needs. If you want to add a spiritual need to my needs, just don't call it choice theory, call it something else. So I feel like that's what I've done, exactly the same thing. I've learned control theory and choice theory, and mine is a little bit different. So I'm calling it mental freedom. It's not reality therapy, it's psychoeducational. So these 6 sessions, the counselor, the coach teaches and then processes. And if you're a coach, you're processing, where are you with these concepts and where do you want to go? And if you're counseling, you're looking at, well, how do you think you got to this place? And how are you feeling about being in this place? And, you're trying to understand more than change it and move forward. So both ways work. It's just, what way do you want to work with this particular client? So it's been really fun teasing it all out and figuring it out.
Sounds wonderful, Kim.
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It feels
So-
really, really good.
yes, it does. Sounds good.
I'm gonna research you again. If I know, what, and I know the answer, but I want you to think about. So let's say that someone's trying to do something similar, create research about what they're doing. What suggestions would you give them then, other than to call Cam Richardson? But that's an answer too. Have somebody,
Well, we have somebody. We have somebody. He's on your research committee. I don't think he does research, but he has research connections too. You know who I'm talking about? Wyoming, I think, is where he is. What is his name? I trained him and I'm drawing a blank, and he's going to be mad at me if he listens to this later. It'll come to me later. Wesley,
Wesley.
yes. I called him and I talked to him about this because I thought maybe he could help me, and he knew someone and he was going to talk to them, but I didn't hear back from Wes, so I went with Cam. So
Mhm.
I think there's a couple of things. Don't do your own research. You need to have an objective person from a university to run the numbers. I'll also say to do it right, and by right, I mean a study that could be submitted for evidence-based practice. It's work. It is not easy. I'm not trying to discourage anyone, I'm just saying, be prepared. It's not something you're going to do in a weekend. It's going to take some time. So I started this research in January, and it was the sessions with the people were done in April, and then they ran their own mental freedom groups. I gave them till September to get those done. And then we've had the numbers, but the person that's crunching them for me, she works in Chicago, but she lives, or she has relatives in Turkey. So she was in Turkey during the summer. She wasn't able to do anything, and then her fall semester was crazy, so she didn't do anything during fall, but she's working on them now. So you just have to know that it doesn't happen fast. And I think what's important to me, sure, I could have put something together that would have, like I did for Secrets of Happy Couples, it could have been quicker, but it isn't going to move mental freedom towards evidence-based practice. And I really want it to become an evidence-based practice. So you gotta put in the time and put in the work, and don't get discouraged. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other is really all it takes. Have your plan, know what you're trying to do, and just check things off as you do them. That's how I've been doing it, one step at a time. I think that's really all I can say.
Mhm.
We also have Jamie. What is Jamie's last name? Not Jamie, I'm sorry. There's a woman at Slippery Rock in Pennsylvania. I don't know if she does research, but she's in the counseling or psych department there, and she might be another contact. I thought about reaching out to her. And any of our Glasser scholars who are still connected to the Institute. There's not a lot, but Gloria Sisse is one, and we have another woman out in California. So finding people at universities or with university connections that could actually run the numbers for you makes a difference too, because if you do your own research, you could change numbers, you could, finagle stuff. It just doesn't have the same degree of
Right.
validity if someone else is researching you.
So when you ask those people to do those things, is that a contract job, or is that you pay them to do that? I'm just wondering about the monetary, because we've talked on the research committee about funding, and it's incredibly expensive. And so I don't know, and I hate to ask that, but you can just say yes or no. You don't have to, I'm not asking numbers, but
Yeah, no, I didn't pay anybody.
okay.
I didn't pay
So-
anybody. But I do know that it can be expensive. Now, I just recently learned something that I will share with you. I I have a connection who learned mental freedom, who is on a board of an organization, excuse me, that does policy writing for nonprofits that work with marginalized communities. So he's on the board of, it's called Georgia Center for Opportunity. And he taught the director there mental freedom. And the director thought, this is great. And he felt like the director said there's a little bit of a disconnect between policymakers and the implementation of the program. He said the policymakers want the curriculum, and they want the, I's dotted, T's crossed, all of that. And the people in the trenches, they just want the principles that are going to work with the people that they're working with. So this guy believes that mental freedom has both of those things. It has the principles and it has the research. And he said that there's a university in Georgia that he's connected to that will do a small research project just to get started to see if there's validity. And if there is validity, they refer it to this organization or a department, I guess, in Notre Dame, who does research for organizations who lack the funding to do their own research. And they open doors and they get you on stages, and if the research pans out, it could be really good. So I just recently learned about that. So that's part of what's happening with mental freedom right now. We're
Another
working
avenue,
on
yeah.
making that connection.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
great.
So I think for anybody listening to this, I know that this organization has been struggling with doing the proper research to get this evidence-based practice status. And I think if we all think about the people we know who work at universities, who are in the education, psychology, counseling, social work departments, doesn't matter how old they are. They could be 25 years old and working in a university. Um, it could, they may not be researchers like Wesley. He doesn't do research, but he knows people who does research. So
Right.
I think those are the questions that we need to think about, and we need to ask and see what connections we can make that way.
The connections.
I also think I just wrote about this in a blog yesterday because people are they're attacking, that's a strong word, like people attacked Glasser, but they're attacking Gary Chapman. If you know who Gary Chapman is, he's the man that wrote the 5 Love Languages book. And they're trying to tear apart his work and say it has no evidence base. There's no scientific aspect to his work. Well, anybody who's ever used the 5 Love Languages knows that there's something to them. I've used them. I wrote about it in my book, Secrets of Happy Couples. There's something about it, just like we all know that there's something about reality therapy and choice theory. We're clinicians, we use it, we know it works. But Glasser, even though he was a psychiatrist, he was seen as an outsider. I mean, anybody who writes a book warning psychiatry can be hazardous to your mental health is not going to be embraced by the psychiatric community. So people didn't want to research him, or if they did, they wanted to prove him wrong. And that's what I think has happened in the past. So we may have some connections to bridge. And I'll tell you that Mike Fulkerson was instrumental as one of my peer reviewers for mental freedom, because I had written a bit like Glasser would have written about how, the medical model is all wrong and we need to think about it this way. And he said, Kim, what if you softened that a little bit and just said, mental freedom is an alternative to the medical model. I don't have to make it confrontational. I can just, make it, here's an alternative, right? And so I'm not making enemies. And I'm not saying that's what Glasser did, but I think people took it that way. So it's finding a way to use caring habits, even with psychiatrists or people who maybe don't agree with us. We can be the alternative, but we don't have to be the bully or the victim. We're just another voice in the field, and maybe there won't be as much pushback to that. I don't know.
That's beautifully said. Really
Well, that's
beautifully
Mike
said.
Fulkerson. So I want to give credit where credit is
Yeah,
due. He
that's
changed
really,
my thinking on that.
I think
It
that
was very helpful.
Plus, that's using what we teach.
Exactly.
Again, how interesting. Any other questions? Anybody else? Tom, Barbara?
No, because to me, choice theory is a way of life.
Yes.
Correct.
You have to live it. If you don't live it, it isn't. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
And just like it's almost like a religion as a way of life. And trying to teach that to somebody who doesn't understand it, or it's like trying to teach them a different religion, trying to teach a Muslim Christianity.
Trying to make a Republican a Democrat or a Democrat a Republican. It's not going to happen.
All those lines are getting very blurred.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nobody knows what that means anymore. Oh, my
I
goodness.
know, you're right. And I don't
It-
want to talk politics, but it's
No,
just another
no.
example of
Yeah,
how we're like this. And
yeah,
instead of trying to understand what do we have in common, not
common, yeah,
what divides us, like Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, we could talk about all
yeah.
kinds of things. And while you're never going to convince me that the medical model is valid, I don't have to make you wrong. If you believe that, that's fine. You can believe that. Are you interested in hearing what I think? And maybe we can just share what each other thinks and we can respect each other and agree to disagree, and that's fine. I mean, I don't have a need to change somebody else's mind, but if I give you information that might cause you to be a little curious, maybe 6 months from now, maybe 6 years from now, you might think about something a little differently, and maybe I will too.
Mhm.
So it's, I think that we want to have our colleagues value what we do and not see us as, I mean, I still hear things like, oh, that Glasser, he was the crazy one that doesn't believe in mental illness. And I'm like, no, that is not what defines William Glasser. And it's not that he doesn't think there's no mental illness. He thinks mental illness are chosen behaviors, not a disease. And so, finding ways to talk that can dispel the misconceptions that people have, I think could help also.
One of the other
I like
things
that.
I noticed, I, in the news recently, they've been talking about the educational system and how they can modify it and add this here and put, particularly with regard to the mental health of the students, they're gonna hire a bunch more psychologists.
Yeah, like that's going to help.
Like, hey, why don't you just go to the choice theory way of teaching the school, which has been proven to work, and you won't need to hire all these bloody
Right,
psychologists to help the
right,
kids because the teachers themselves will be doing it.
right.
And I was thinking that when they were talking about spending billions of dollars more to hire people to fix the kids, when no, you just fix the system and everything else comes out in the water.
That's right. There's nothing wrong with those kids.
Yeah.
But,
So
Yeah.
it was, the solution is simple when you know choice theory.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kim, last words.
If they want
for
a
the- for the-
solution, I wonder if they want a solution or not. It looks good to hire all these people for the parents. I don't know.
Well, like here in Los Angeles, we have a problem with people speeding, particularly on,
Yes, you do.
well, on the PCH,
Expressways.
the Malibu area. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna hire police officers to be there 24/7. They're gonna put in stoplights. They're gonna do all kinds of things. And the Mexicans have a real good solution for it. Put in these humps. Cars can't drive fast over these, the little humps that they put.
Yeah.
They
Speed
can't drive
bumps.
fast over. It'll slow everybody down. You don't have to hire all the cops. You don't have to
Right.
do it. It's there
Yeah.
all the time. When we drove in Mexico, they had signs up saying hump ahead, slow down. And if you didn't slow down, you'd tear the bottom out of your car.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you learn very quickly, slow down. You don't have
Creative thinking, yes.
You don't have to put cops up there saying, slow down, I'll give you a ticket. I'll put the bump in there and it's there all the time. It works.
True. True.
And it's
They don't need
cheap.
brakes or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's inexpensive and it works the whole time. But no, they don't think of simple things like that. And this is what Glasser thought of, is simple ways of describing what we do and think. And that's what made
Yeah.
him so brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Took the complex and made it simple.
Yeah.
Kim, last words?
Well, My last words are just thank you so much for inviting me here. Was funny to me to get called to a research call because I thought, me? I'm not a researcher. What do you want to hear from me? So thank you, Janet, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the little research that I've done. And I hope that it's been helpful for the people who might listen to this later, and Barbara and Tom. It's been fun to be here and talk with you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kim. It's
Yeah.
good to
Thanks,
see you
Barbara.
I
again.
know, can't
A
wait to
fellow
see it.
small-scale
I
person.
know.
Oh, but one more thing, Kim,
Oh,
Yes, sir.
3 copies of your book, one has to go to each of us.
Okay, I can do that. No problem.
Okay, Tom.
thank you, Tom.
If you come to Chicago, I'll have them
Yeah.
there in
Oh,
July.
will you have them? Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I'll have
Good.
them in July.
Oh, good.
Yep, for
Hope
sure.
to see everybody there. All right, thank
You're
you.
right.
All
Okay.
right.
Good
Hey,
night,
thank you, Kim.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye
Thanks.
now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.